So I saw this out. It came out 3 days ago, and it's been shared everywhere. it's we're gonna go through it. So this is from someone that I believe is French. America should allow other countries to vote in the 2020 election. This is a country which calls itself leader of the free world and has huge global influence in terms of foreign policy and economics. Now that Trump won't acknowledge basic things like climate change, it's time other countries had a say. Now, like there's so much to say. There's so much to say about this. Like I know, like the author even says, I know it sounds absurd, but we're gonna go through it step by step. So she first says, I was 9 years old when I seriously pondered the results of a U.S. presidential election. It was 2000, and my father suggested we bet on who would win the 2000 vote, George W. Bush or Al Gore. In the kitchen of our apartment in the Paris suburb, okay, she is French. I bet a piece of gum that it would be Gore. 2 months later, the Supreme Court decided otherwise, and I didn't realize until how many years later how close I had come to being right. Perhaps that's where it originated. The idea that maybe other countries shouldn't just be left wringing their hands every 4 years and waiting to see who U.S. citizens had chosen to appoint to speak to the White House staffer on scandal, the leader of the free world. Now, the first issue, again, right off the bat, is it's like all I get is a sense of entitlement. It's one, for example. Yeah, like other countries, that happens with everyone. Like I watched the French election. I paid attention to the UK election. I paid attention to a few European elections there. And it's like, I get that I don't have any kind of a say. Like, I can push, maybe, I can be a bit influential on social media, maybe. I could make a video about a candidate. I could have some influence there. But as a vote, no. Like, as a vote, I don't have a vote. I accept that. I don't expect to have a vote because I leave it up to the people to vote for their nation. It's more of a sense of autonomy in that, like, I have no right to interfere with those things. I have no right to interfere with the French election or the UK election, even though their policies might affect me personally. Like, thinking about Brexit, for example, the EU is a very powerful country. Now, so is the US, but the EU will no doubt affect US policy, or will no doubt influence the US in some way. That doesn't mean that even though I might be affected by them in some way, especially when it comes to the internet, of course. I'm just thinking of the internet. Like, sure, EU law affects me. Like, I made videos about, I believe, Article 13, was that the one? About that stuff might affect me. That will no doubt affect America in some way, even though it's outside of our, like, we're outside the jurisdiction. It's the internet, like, that affects pretty much everyone. And yet I would never say that I have a right to vote in their elections. That's not my responsibility, because it's more like a government is an organization, and again, like an organization, I don't have the right, no matter what that organization does, I don't have the right to step in and say, okay, I have a say. If it's a company, if the organization is a company, I mean, I can vote with my dollars and buy their products like that. Sure, I can do that. But I have no right to just step in and say, okay, I want to say on your board of directors or whatever. That's ridiculous. And perhaps the seed of an idea continued to gestate in 2004 when we waited to find out whether John Kerry would deprive George W. Bush of a second term. Then in 2008, when t-shirts bearing Barack Obama's red and blue hope poster started cropping up on the streets of the French capital, and again in 2012 when we learned the names of his Republican challengers. Now, yes, I admit that the U.S. is a bit unique in that it does seem that most of the Western world, like Europe and Australia, New Zealand, they at least like follow our elections a little bit in the sense that they know who the big candidates are, because we are a world power. We're very much in control, and that only applies to a few people. Like that only applies to a few presidents and world leaders. Like I think most people know that Putin is the president of, I believe it's president, right, or is it prime minister? I think it's president. Most people know that Putin is the president is the world leader, or is the country's leader of Russia. Most people know that Donald Trump is president of the United States. Not so many people know about Theresa May and Justin Trudeau, but they're kind of on the next tier. Maybe. To be honest, I don't even know who the world leader of Australia is. To be honest, that's probably bad. I should know that. But things like that, where I get it, that we are world powers, therefore we do influence the world. And there are some ways that I don't like how the U.S. influences the world, especially when it comes to the Middle East. But that doesn't justify, like, that's just life. Why does that justify a vote? In fact, it was actually seen, in the United States at least, that the vote was seen as a trade-off for the draft. That you signed up for the draft, and in return you get the right to vote. Now, I am opposed to that. I'm opposed to the draft because I really cannot think of a good argument for the draft, either morally or practically. Like, it's just, there's no good reason for it, based on what I've read. But that was how it was seen. It was seen like you contributed to your country in some way, and in return, you got the vote. You were a citizen, like, thinking about Starship Troopers, the book, not the movie, because those are very different, or at least the ideology behind them is very different. But that was how it was seen. Like you got your vote in return for like contributing to the country as a U.S. citizen. And when that kind of went away, when women got the right to vote because they didn't have to sign up for the draft, that whole concept went away. And again, I'm not really upset at the fact that it went away. I don't think it was a bad thing that idea went away. But that's an idea that's still worth keeping in mind, that I think at least has some value, of the idea that you are trading something for your vote. Like, it's not just that, oh, you live on this plot of land, therefore you have a voice. There's a purpose behind it. But what I don't like is, like, again, why should you have the right to vote in the election? Like, imagine what happened. Because all I'm thinking of is if that idea is there, that citizens can vote for a country, to appoint their leaders of their own country, then what happens if, say, we did go with this person's idea and French citizens got the right to vote in the U.S. election? Well, you know what that means. Like, I imagine that would put the U.S. on track to become the world government, because essentially, like, oh, we get the vote. Well, now we can say, like, oh, if you have the right to influence us, how can we influence you? And then, like, honestly, I think that's the paving steps to a world government. Something along those lines. But anyways, we'll continue. Then, of course, came November 2016, by which time I had moved from my native France to the U.S. Oh, she's a U.S. citizen. Okay, yeah. I moved from my native France to the U.S. So, did she immigrate? Or is she just I don't know. I came home from work at approximately 4 the morning after the election and spent an hour or two on the phone with my mother. It was mid-morning in Paris, talking about Donald Trump's ascent to power and what it meant for America as well as for the world. One election after the next, we have seen how much the results of the U.S. presidential vote impact not just the 50 states, but the rest of the planet, too. And yes, that is, like, again, that's what happens. Like, China does affect the world. Like, China is a world power. China has a lot of influence. That doesn't mean I think I should have the right to vote in a Chinese election. Are Chinese elections even legitimate? I'm not even sure. And if the future of foreign countries is shaped to a significant extent by what goes on U.S. Election Day, shouldn't they get a say in who gets to lead the most powerful nation in the world for the next 4 years? You do get a say. That's the thing. Like, the rest of the world does get, or at least the world with internet access, I think, does get a say in the U.S. election. Like, you don't think the BBC contributed to, or like change people's minds in some way? You don't think RT changed people's minds in some way? And I get, like, that's like, those are government establishments. But again, like, media and just people on Twitter, like, you can influence elections in the sense of you can seek to change people's minds. If you don't think like how things are, you can go and change people's minds. You can go talk to U.S. citizens and try to change their minds online. You can come visit the U.S. I don't know. You can do whatever you can influence the world in that way. And I think that's fine how it is, to be honest. Although I find it interesting that we literally just wrapped up. Like, we just finally, with the Mueller report coming out, we just finally wrapped up the idea of foreign interference in our elections, and now we're talking about, like, we just wrapped up how bad foreign interference in our election is. We just wrapped up that it didn't happen, at least in the sense that of the Trump-Russia collusion. And then we're finally done with that, and now there's articles on how, yes, foreign interference is a good thing. It's like, why? Okay. In other words, shouldn't foreign countries have a right to vote in the U.S. presidential election? I know. The idea sounds so absurd, so outrageous that it's hard to know where to begin your rebuttal. I floated around timidly in bars and at various dinner parties over the years, and let me tell you, it's hard to get people to agree with me. Yes, that's because it's a terrible idea. And I get it. It's never been done. I will probably never be done. Oh, I see what she means. But last week, a terrorist killed 50 people in 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. The alleged gunman, who, here's what I find interesting, who had referred to himself as a white nationalist, viewed Donald Trump as a symbol of renewed white identity. I find it very interesting that the shooter had a lot of bad things to say about Donald Trump. He said, in response to, he had a Q&A format in his manifesto, when he was like, do I view Donald Trump as a leader and policy, like, by his policies and as a leader? God, no. So I find it rather interesting that she took half of that, but she didn't take the whole part where he said he is not a fan of Donald Trump as a president. So very interesting there. So yes, I think it's high time to acknowledge the fact that what happens in the U.S. has immense tangible consequences on the rest of the world, and I am tired of crossing my fingers hoping that American voters will do the right thing. Isn't she an American voter? Like, that's why I'm confused. She was in the U.S. Or, again, is she just visiting? Was that what she was talking about? But, again, like, that's up to her. If she moved to the U.S. and became a citizen, that's up to her now. She can do that. She has her vote. if she is a U.S. citizen. And if not, it's like she can change people's minds. That's what she's doing here. Did the United States influence the shooter? Like, not really. I mean, in a certain sense of in the internet, just in the grand conversation that crosses the entire world. But again, like, why does that justify a vote? Like, she's just saying, like, things aren't going my way, therefore I want control. Like, therefore, the French, God, no, I don't want the French to vote in the U.S. election. Of all people, please not the French. I remember the Iraq War debate and how George W. Bush expressed his disappointment at my country and others for deciding not to align with U.S. forces, while insisting that he was not mad we had decided to opt out of the invasion. I remember our collective bewilderment at the term freedom fries, and I remember lacking clarity on some of the details on account of being 11 years old at the time. What does that have to do with justifying the vote? Like, everyone feels that way about everything. Or at least with the election. But the feeling that the U.S., more than any other nation, shapes our collective future has only grown clearer and stronger since. Yeah, that's the thing, like, the U.S. does have influence, but again, so does China. Like, why isn't she talking about China? Why isn't she talking about Russia? Would she really be okay with Russia having, would she really be okay with Russia voting in certain elections? Like, do you think, I want to know her opinion on the EU, because, again, like, France, that has a big impact in the EU. Would she be fine with just, like, saying, yeah, everyone has the right to vote directly in EU elections rather than the way they do it now, like appointing people to appoint people and all that, or voting for people to vote for people and that. But I want to know if she's consistent on this. It's the entitlement that bothers me the most. Like, I can't imagine looking at another country and thinking I should have the right to control their elections. Now, I'd prefer if things went my way, and that's why I'm going to say what I think and hopefully change their minds. Although I don't think I have very much influence over the Chinese election here. But it's just the sense of entitlement that bothers me, because when I see this, I'm just thinking of the people that are like, yeah, this organization doesn't do things the way I want to, and I'm not part of that organization, but I want in, and I want the right to control it, and I want the right to change things. That bugs me. It's like, no, just live and let live. Jeez, shut up. And it's like, sure, do I oppose the U.S. government interfering in all kinds of world affairs in mostly negative ways? Yes, I'm opposed to that, especially when it comes to like all of our foreign invasions and that, and election meddling. I am against that, sure. I'm against it when any country does it. But no, that doesn't mean I'm giving up the right to. That doesn't mean I think everyone should have the right to vote there. Because imagine just. It's the centralization of it. It's like, imagine living in France and thinking you have any kind of knowledge of American politics, and it's like, do most Americans? Well, no, they're not that informed. It's like, but I don't claim to talk about what's best for France. When I talk about, have I ever talked about France in terms of their elections? I supported a candidate. I thought a candidate was there was a candidate I wanted to win in the French election, but I never claimed to be like, no, I should have the authority over this. Like, all I had was a voice. I never claimed to have an authority, and I don't think anyone outside of a country should have the authority like that. Perhaps it helps to imagine America as the pot in which tomorrow's ideas are brewed, for better or worse. Perhaps it helps, too, to look at the more tangible signs of how U.S. politics contribute to shaping all of our lives. The most convincing example may be global warming, and Donald Trump's overt skepticism when it comes to climate change. And again, I find this very interesting about how uninformed she is on the issues when she's looking at she really thinks that Donald Trump's opinion on climate change is like affecting the world in a major way. Like, do you think that's really messing up France? It's like, okay, it might affect it. Like, it affects the Paris Climate Accord, of course. But that's one policy. And again, like, that doesn't give you the right to vote. Like, it's rather interesting, the absolute, like, double standard she has here. Like, she's talking about global warming. Why not talk about China? Why not talk about Africa? Like, why isn't she talking about interfering in African elections or the Chinese elections? Huh? Why did she pick America when it comes to global warming? It's like, imagine how much, like, look at what America has done to stop global warming. It's like, why did she pick the country that has done the most to stop global warming compared to most, like, world powers? I find that ridiculous. In January this year, the president of the world's most powerful nation infamously tweeted, "In the beautiful Midwest, wind chill temperatures." Yeah, she's talking about global warming. She's getting mad at the tweets. And honestly, when Trump tweets about global warming, that, like, I like it when he does that because it just makes the right people mad. It's like anyone that like puts so much value on a tweet like that deserves to be mad. Because I'm of the opinion that I think the president's taking the right approach on global warming. I think it is a real thing. Like, how much can we change it? I don't know. Like, but the government's definitely not going to do a good job of it. That's my opinion there. Like, whether or not no matter how much of a big issue it is, the government's not going to do a job. Like, the government's going to screw it up and make it worse. So I just want them to stand back. The market will fix it. And I'm confident. And it's not even like a blind faith, like, oh, the market will fix it. The market has fixed it. Or the market is doing its best to fix it. It's like, do you really think the U.S. government will make it better, if not worse? Even if they take steps to fix it, I think those steps will backfire. Like, we can see the recycling program. Like, I've read all kinds of stuff on how just recycling actually does more damage to the environment than good. Like the standard recycling stuff, and how advertising, all these advertising and campaigning for recycling uses up all these resources, and what it gets people to recycle is less than the resources it costs to campaign about it. So it's stuff like that. It goes without saying that whatever the U.S. does or does not do to limit the effects of global warming impacts every single being, human or otherwise, on this planet. And again, why isn't she applying this to everything? What I don't understand is, why isn't she just saying, everyone should be able to vote in every election, and in which case it's just, world government. It's like, no. I agree that Los Angeles has a big impact on my life, in the political sense, at least. Hollywood, Los Angeles, Hollywood is in Los Angeles. Hollywood has a big impact on the world. There are loads of people watching what Hollywood puts out. Do I think I should have the right to vote in the Los Angeles elections? No, that's moronic. Then comes the economy. In June last year, we were warned that tensions between the U.S. and its main trading partners could precipitate global trade turmoil and similar in scale to the 2008 financial crisis. Whoever gets to sit in the Oval Office then plays a major role in shaping the state of our wallets as well as the state of the planet. Is it really that outrageous that people around the world might want to have a say on who runs the show? Again, what about the things happening in Europe right now? Do you think I should have a right to a vote in foreign elections? I don't like how she does not. I mean, maybe she does at the end, but she has not addressed that so far, because that's going to be the biggest rebuttal so far, and she hasn't addressed that. I am, of course, aware that the U.S. is extremely unlikely to go along with my idea. This isn't a country that's particularly known for avidly seeking external input. And, of course, that's the idea that the right to vote is intrinsically tied to residence, and that those who don't live in a given country aren't qualified to make a call on what goes in said country. Again, this applies to, states and counties, too. Don't forget that. Should I vote on what? Should I be able to vote on what happens in Paris? I don't see why. That affects me in some very minute way. So where is the line drawn? She hasn't addressed that yet. And I will say, for the point, I'm not upset. I'm not bothered when foreigners talk about the U.S. I know people that get really touchy about that, where it's you don't know, you don't even live in our country. Why are you talking about our country stuff? You don't live in Romania. Why are you talking about Romanian politics, stuff like that? It's no, I'm fine with people talking about and giving their input on foreign politics, as long as they admit that it's sure, I don't live in Slovakia. So, I don't live in Slovakia, so I don't know too much about what goes on in Slovakia. And even if I did my research, I don't feel like I have enough. I wouldn't have enough of a say to, or I would deserve enough of a say to vote in their elections, or to act like I'm an expert on Slovakian politics. If someone was if a Slovakian started talking to me about Slovakian politics, I would keep in mind and defer to them in certain aspects of, yeah, this is what I've read. I might have done more research than that person, but they're the one that's actually living it. So stuff like that. I fully defer to that, but at the same time, it's I'm not upset that someone that was raised in Paris is talking about the U.S. I'm upset that they think they have a right to vote in U.S. elections. That's moronic. Except things are more complicated and more nuanced than that. Take, for example, the idea that living in a country is a condition to having the right to vote there. Permanent residents such as myself, also known as green card holders, also known as... Okay, so she's not a U.S. citizen, but she lives in the U.S. Gotcha. Pay the same income tax as U.S. citizens, but don't get to vote. Naturally, U.S. citizens, like citizens of many other countries, still get to vote for their president, even if they permanently move to a different country. All this to say, there is an established disequilibrium between who gets to vote in the U.S. presidential election and who arguably has more skin in the game. Well, again, if you want me to talk about that, I can make plenty of things. There are plenty of issues with our voting system and plenty of issues that I would make changes to. I think I'm not even opposed to the idea of, say, restricting basically, if you are getting welfare from the U.S., you forfeit your right to vote. I'm fine with something like that, because as someone could point out, it's kind of can someone that is getting welfare from the U.S. really look at this without any kind of conflict of interest? The fact that they are getting welfare is a clear conflict of interest in terms of voting. So it's sure, I would take away there. I would make it a rule, you don't have the right to vote. if you're currently taking welfare, because that is a conflict of interest. And as with all conflicts of interest, we try to reduce them and eliminate them as much as possible. And here we don't even acknowledge them. So I certainly want to make changes. And I'm certainly I do not dispute that this woman probably is more informed on U.S. politics, living in the U.S., than the person that was just born and raised there, never read a book in their life, doesn't know anything about anything, and hasn't even bothered to learn. I admit that there is certainly a disequilibrium there, and I will take steps and I think we can take steps to fix that, as the example I just listed when it comes to welfare. But then it comes to, okay, let's say, for example, that we have a test, that you have to pass a test to be able to vote in our elections. Well, again, who makes the test? Like, how easy is it to exclude certain people like that? It's so easy that once you establish some kind of test or establish some kind of filter to remove the right to vote for some people, it's like, well, who controls that filter? And that's when it becomes, then I admit that's a difficult thing. It's like, well, once you give people some kind of filter on who has the right to vote, that becomes an issue. And like, that's something that I don't really have an answer for. How would it work then if the U.S. were to entertain the possibility of letting foreigners participate in the presidential vote? And again, I'm not holding my breath. How would we make this happen? Does each foreign country get the same weight as each of the 50 states? Surely there would be giving too much weight to the outside world. Do we restrict the vote to member states of NATO and or historical allies? This seems slightly more realistic, as realistic as it gets in this purely hypothetical scenario, but also somewhat unfair to those whose voices would be left out. But then I think, like, what of the issue of, she's talking about, sure, they're dumb Americans that know nothing about anything, and yet they go and vote. But again, like, what about the French? Like, there are no doubt dumb French people that have no idea how the U.S. election works, and she's saying they should get the vote. That doesn't fix our problem of there are people that don't pay attention that vote. And there are also people that are well-informed that would probably make good decisions that also don't have the right to vote. But you know what? Like, there's no good solution to that. And she has not provided a good solution to that so far. It's mostly just kind of throwing out ideas and see what sticks. But no, I think, like, all of this seems so far to be worse than just, okay, if you're a U.S. citizen, you can vote. I think that's a good test so far. And that establishes at the very least that, and I would actually even be like for the idea. I would even be not entirely opposed to the idea of, I'm thinking, like, maybe we could have the U.S. citizenship test. You could have something like a U.S. citizenship test where, essentially, if you're born and raised in the United States, you have to pass some kind of citizenship test. I'm fine with that, to get the right to vote. Like, because I had to sign up for the draft. I'm fine with replacing signing up for the draft with some kind of citizenship test that maybe all 50 states could participate in, including the really hardcore conservative ones, including the really hardcore liberal ones. They would all have to agree with some kind of test. I think something like that at least is an idea that it needs some tweaking, it needs some work, but is way better than what she's suggesting so far. Because I admit, like, I am someone that's, I want the right to have an opinion. I want the right to say what I think. Like, I want the ability to put out this information, or I want the ability to have a scene in the conversation here, and that's why I read. That's why I do all this research, because I'm not going to be that person. I don't want to be that person that just kind of steps back and says, okay, I know nothing, even though, like, certain issues like religion, I don't have much of an opinion on that because I am incredibly uninformed, and one day I'll sit down and go through that stuff with people that know much more than me. But I don't like the idea that it seems that it's like we should make, if anything, like, she's complaining about all these people that I don't know. It's just it doesn't seem very like a fleshed out argument. I brought up loads of issues with what she said so far, and she hasn't addressed it. But there's one last paragraph. So I have clearly disclosed my status as a French citizen, so I know the question will be raised. How would I react if someone proposed to let other countries vote in the French presidential election? Good for her. Well, she did. I was waiting for her to bring that up, and she did. Well, France is currently about 5 spots behind the U.S. in the ranking of the world's most powerful nations, and its GDP is more than 7 times lower. But sure, should France even have the kind of political and cultural influence that the U.S. currently yields, then I'd be inclined to let others have a say. In fact, I might even vote in favor of it. Well, she points that out at the end. Should France ever have the kind of political and cultural influence the U.S. does? Well, it's like, so what you're saying is it's in terms of political and cultural influence. Well, I mean, to be honest, cultural influence, that's not political. Like, I don't see how, like, voting, see, voting is a political matter. Cultural influence, like, France has every right to influence the U.S. in terms of culture. They have every right to just start going at it and then just start producing all this stuff and working really hard to influence the U.S. with their culture. They have every right to do that. They can do that now. But the voting part is completely different because that's a political matter, and that's something separate. And for that part, it's just like sucks to be you. I hate to say, it's like France is not a powerful country compared to the U.S. And it's like, I get, sure, they were our first ally, sure, they helped us out, and I appreciate that. And I'm pretty sure they gave us the Statue of Liberty as well. But it's like that's politics. Like there are certain things where I don't see why they've not established what they have done to earn that right. That's the thing. They have not established what they have done to earn such a right to vote in the election. And like she's talking about we should expand the vote. I'm saying we should contract the vote in a way to people that are informed. But as I've said, like I would support maybe some kind of like citizenship test. Like the same test that you would give to people trying to immigrate and become U.S. citizens. Sure, I would have something like that. And then as I say that, I do think about the fact that, like, do French people really, I don't know if this is true or not, but I don't think it is. Do French people learn U.S. history? Because I know we learn European history, but it's very minor. Like, I took a world history class in my high school, and I took a European history class in my high school. I don't know too much. The majority of what I've learned has been from just outside of school. And I really didn't learn that much. So I want to know, like, how much do French people actually know about the U.S.? But she seems to be trying to make voting even easier, and it's like, no, I want voting to be harder. I want to restrict it. And again, like I understand, as I pointed out earlier, there are so many kinds of things when it comes to how do we make that test? Who influences the test? Because as soon as you set up a barrier, it's like, well, whoever has power over that barrier, you better hope they don't get corrupt. Which is why I think, again, I'm just throwing out ideas here. And that is what she's doing, although my ideas are more fleshed out, I believe. That I'm sure, like some kind of citizenship test maybe to say you have to pass this, you have to do certain things, and maybe you have to take it every 10 years or something, because there is an issue with old people, with people that are in their 90s in a nursing home that have dementia, going out and like their parents will take them to a voting booth and they'll vote. It's like, that's kind of an issue there. They have no idea what's going on, and like they're just following what their relatives are telling them, and they're voting, and who knows if that's what they really want. But I get that there are issues, but here I am trying to offer solutions about how to make voting better, and she's just like, yeah, just open it up to everyone. But no, this is a bad idea. I thought we just established that foreign interference in elections was bad, and now that we finally wrapped up, it's now foreign interference in election is good. But yeah, her ideas are wrong. I'm just going to say that. Let me know what you think in the comments section. If you disagree with her in a way that I didn't state, let me know what you think, and then post a comment about that. If you disagree with me, let me know why. If you think her argument's better than mine, let me know why. If you think mine is better than hers, let me know why. Post a comment. I want feedback in some sense. I appreciate that. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more. Those are also very good feedback mechanisms. And thanks for watching.